For another perspective on it, let's go back over to Rick.
For an interesting perspective on legacies, we head back to Columbus, joined by Big Ten Network football analyst Glen Mason. Glenn, let's harken back a few years. You were on Woody Hayes' staff during the infamous incident where Coach Hayes punched a Clemson player during a bowl game. What was it like for the rest of that staff, for the assistants and the players on that team to know that Coach Hayes, who had done so much at Ohio State, would always have his legacy tarnished by one moment?
Rick, first of all, that was kind of a shocking night. It seems like yesterday, and it was a long time ago. You know, when it happened, I was right on the sideline, and then the fight pursued right after Coach Hayes hit Charlie Bauman from Clemson. Most of us really didn't realize what happened until we got back to the hotel and saw it on TV. And then the next day, we took off on our way back to Columbus, and while we're en route, it was announced that Coach Hayes had been, in fact, fired. We didn't know that. We landed in Columbus, and obviously security wasn't what it is nowadays, and literally the TV trucks were out on the runway, and before Coach Hayes got off the plane, he addressed the team in the usual manner, tell them drive home safe, get back to school on time, and then announced that he was no longer the football coach at Ohio State. He would never coach again. And we were shocked that all of a sudden, you know, one day here was a guy at Ohio State, Coach Woody Hayes, that you thought would be there forever, and then after one incident, he's gone forever.
Now, Mace, there's obviously a big difference here. That was one moment in time. It seems like if all these reports about Jim Tressel turn out to be true, this was a systematic problem. But people are going to compare two Ohio State coaches whose legacies have been somewhat tarnished. Can you make any type of comparison, or do you contrast the two?
Well, I can make a comparison, but I think they're quite different. You look back to Coach Hayes, who had a great career, 28 years as the Ohio State head football coach. But let's face it, during that 28 years, there were some times that resembled what happened down there in Jacksonville that happened against Clemson that night. How can they forget, back in 1971, Ohio State game against Michigan when Coach Hayes tore up the side markers, and there was an incident one time when Ohio State football coach Woody Hayes punched a photographer during a game. So there were those volatile episodes that took place. So even though it was quite tragic, I think most people would say they were totally surprised like that something happened with Coach Woody Hayes. But with Jim Tressel, let's face it, during his tenure at Ohio State, he has been very successful, and one that was portrayed by himself and by others that he ran a squeaky clean program. And that he was above reproach, and all of a sudden, for these revelations to come out, I think most people are quite shocked.
Mace, your time in Columbus goes way back. Player, assistant coach, you're back in Columbus right now. Can you tell us not only what your reaction is to this entire situation, but also what the mood appears to be like right now in Columbus?
Well, I'm in Columbus, you're right, and I think that they're still shocked, and I think there's two separate schools of thought. There's some people say, I can't believe that Coach Tressel did this and our program is in such bad situation. And then you'll find a large number of people that are still supporting Coach Tressel, thinking that, hey, he got caught in a jam here and he's trying to protect the players, he's trying to protect the program, and he kind of took one for the team, so to speak. From my perspective, I know Jim. I was on the staff with Jim. He was with us a couple of years when I was here at Ohio State. We lived in Worthington, literally a couple blocks together. We rode back and forth to work, and I don't know all the dynamics that have taken place in this really terrible situation that Jim's got himself into. And it's really a shame that his really great career, his record, especially against Michigan, and I think anybody that has an Ohio State background, you hold that game and the record against that team very dear. It's a shame that it's going to be tarnished by this situation.
Glen Mason, we appreciate the time and the very unique perspective on the situation in Columbus. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Rick.
As far as Tressel's legacy on the field, some notes about just how amazing his run at Ohio State has been. He's the only coach to win at least 100 games at two different schools. Joins Joe Paterno as the only coaches to win the Rose, Fiesta, and Sugar Bowls. Currently tied with Bob Stoops from Oklahoma for the most BCS Bowl appearances all time, and a 9-1 record against Michigan in 10 meetings, including a streak of 7 straight wins.